The story opens with Donald attending to his mother, who requires assistance in the middle of the night. Donald is an introvert who lives with his ailing mother Florence. Donald works as a mechanic in his spare time. One day, his neighbor, who is unable to pay him, gives him an old van as recompense. He encourages him to leave the house and live his life, but Donald has difficulty leaving his mother behind. Donald offers to stay and to keep Florence company, but Florence encourages him to go out and have fun. Donald will labor feverishly on the truck for the next 3 days until it is operational. Later, he brings Florence along to show her the repaired van in the hopes of taking her for a trip. Florence, on the other hand, declines, explaining that they still have work to do. Donald has a dream that night in which he sees his mother pleading for help. He abruptly awakens to go check on his mother, but he is met by a strange man driving away. He dashes to the house, only to see his mother's lifeless body on the ground. He summons the cops, who arrive and begin questioning him about the incident. Donald tells them nothing more than the man he saw exiting the house. Later, Florence's funeral is attended by a small group of individuals, including Donald's uncle. A few days after the funeral, Donald is standing in his front garden when he notices a car driving away. The next night, while cleaning his mother's room, Donald hears unusual noises and fetches his shotgun to investigate. He is accosted by 2 masked men who attempt to strangle him with a rope. Donald, on the other hand, lands on his feet since the amateurs left the rope dangling. They have him stand aside as they correct their error. Donald uses the distraction to assault one of the men with the hammer. Donald successfully overpowers the man and breaks his head. He punches the other man to the ground and takes off his mask, only to see a terrified youngster. The boy discloses that they were dispatched to kill him and stage the incident as a suicide. He does, however, have little knowledge on the mission because the deceased was the assassination attempt's leader. Donald considers phoning the cops, but changes his mind after seeing the location where his mother was murdered. When one of the perpetrators' phones rings, he instructs the boy named Bartosz to inform their supervisor that they have completed the mission. The employer offers him the address where they may meet the next day. Donald buries the deceased man in his backyard and prepares to join Bartosz in his investigation of the motive for the attack. Donald interrogates Bartosz about his mother's death on the way, but Bartosz has no idea who killed her. He admits that he was pushed into this position after they kidnapped and threatened to kill his sister. Donald wishes to avenge his mother's death. He persuades Bartosz to collaborate with him in order to save his sister Kaya, to which he agrees. When the two arrive at their meeting point, they notice a young girl being carried into a building. Bartosz believes she is Kaya. Donald gets his shotgun and leads the way to the building. Bartosz walks through the front door, where he meets Gavigan and Jerome, the men who sent them to murder Donald. Gavigan requests proof of completion, but Bartosz says the evidence is on the other man's phone. He explains that Donald murdered the other man, but he also killed Donald. Bartosz asks to speak with his sister, but the female he saw earlier turns out to be someone else. She is just another kidnapped female who was apprehended while fleeing. Jerome disposes of her after Gavigan attacks her with a hammer. Donald quickly locks him inside the store and confronts Gavigan. He confronts him about his mother's death, but Gavigan denies any involvement. He, on the other hand, drags him to the van and knocks him into. They drive to the forest, where Donald forces Gavigan to expose the perpetrators of his mother's attack, Trevor and Frankie. Donald believes Trevor and Frankie went on a burglary, but when Florence awoke, they were compelled to kill her. Gavigan, on the other hand, demonstrates that the problem is more serious than he can conceive. Donald gets out of the van to potty, and Gavigan takes advantage of the opportunity to attack Bartosz and escape from the van. Donald notices him and runs for his shotgun, intending to pursue him. Gavigan frees his hands and calls Trevor, informing him that Donald is still alive. This concerns Trevor and Frankie. Back in the wilderness, Gavigan ambushes Bartosz and beats him down, threatening to kill his sister. Donald soon appears and holds him at gunpoint. While he is distracted, Bartosz stabs him in the stomach. Before dying, an injured Gavigan discloses that Bartosz's sister is now known as Alicia, and Donald buries him as well. Jerome, on the other hand, was able to break free and inform Frankie about Bartosz's quest for his sister while with Donald. Frankie is furious at their blunder and orders Trevor to personally find the girl. Frankie phones Gavigan's phone, and when Donald answers, she asks him to stop the attacks before anyone else is hurt. Donald inquires about his mother's death, and Frankie suggests Florence was involved in something serious and had a target on her back for years. Donald rejects her accusations and warns her that she now has a target on her back as well. Donald appears at his uncle's house and shows him a photograph of a man who is not his father that he discovered in Florence's chamber. Eamon reveals, grudgingly, that after Donald's father died, the man in the picture, Joe, assisted Florence for a time. Eamon mentions Joe having a daughter, who happens to be Frankie. Donald discovers that Joe became associated with the wrong people, who eventually apprehended and killed him. Donald then goes back to the van and requests that Bartosz search up the name Joe Pierce. Donald learns that he was involved in a series of political killings, but he cannot relate how this might have resulted in Florence's death. Donald is determined to track down Frankie and obtain answers. Bartosz reveals that Kaya knows the location of Frankie's base and that discovering her will bring them directly to Frankie. Donald will act as a customer interested in young females. The two devise a strategy. He phones and asks for Kaya, who has changed her name to Alicia. They are able to schedule a meeting with Alicia for Donald at the given time. Donald and Bartosz arrive at the venue the next day. He enters the building and meets a pimp. He hands him money and is escorted to a room. Donald meets Kaya, who is initially terrified of him, not realizing that he is working with Bartosz. She relaxes and begins to trust Donald after hearing her brother's voice on the phone. The two create a distraction where Donald is able to knock out the pimp. Donald inquires about Frankie's whereabouts but discovers that Kaya has no idea, showing that Bartosz lied to him. He returns to the pimp without delay, wanting to know where Frankie is. Donald tortures the man until he exposes Trevor's address. Bartosz is preoccupied, not noticing Jerome is approaching the building L. They run into Jerome on their way out, and a fight ensues. The two men struggle until they are bloodied, but just as Jerome is about to gain the upper hand, Kaya shoots him dead and assists Donald in exiting the building. The two siblings are overjoyed to see each other again. Frankie and Trevor arrive at the building a few minutes later to discover Jerome dead and the pimp in pain. He insists he never told Donald anything about her, but Frankie beats him to death with an iron box. Donald recovers, and the three set off for the address given to them by the pimp. While they are waiting outside, Donald confesses that Frankie believes Florence is responsible for her father's death, but she is mistaken. Donald locates Trevor and follows him from the place to Frankie's house, where he sees them conversing. Donald pulls his shotgun to end things, but when he sees Frankie's kid approach her, he reconsiders. When they return at night, they are nearly ambushed by a gunman but escape uninjured. Donald is told by Bartosz not to believe his mother is innocent because she may not be the angel he believes she is. Donald pulls over and almost fights with Bartosz over his remarks. He instructs them both to depart. Frankie, on the other hand, is at home when the gunman calls to warn her of his blunder. She blames Trevor for failing to kill Donald when he had the chance. Trevor informs her that she warned her not to kill Florence, but she ignored his advice. Frankie then fires Trevor and orders him to leave her home. When Donald arrives at Eamon's house, it is covered in blood. Donald is urged to quit going after Frankie by Eamon, who has been severely battered. He tells him that Florence and Joe had an affair, but when Joe's enemies attacked a young Donald, Florence abandoned Joe in order to preserve her family. Donald notices Frankie's car parked outside as he peers through the glass. When Frankie notices Donald's van outside, she dispatches one of her men to kill both Eamon and Donald. Frankie decides to go in herself after hearing nothing from her shooter. Before Donald ambushes her and disarms her, she sees Eamon's body and her goon unconscious. He forces her into his van and drives her to the beach where her father was murdered. Trevor, on the other side, receives word that Donald has kidnapped Frankie. Bartosz is concerned about Donald and decides to go looking for him. He goes to Eamon's house with a gun only to find Trevor sitting comfortably there. Donald gives Frankie the picture of Florence with her father the next morning and explains why Florence did what she did. He then leads her to a grave he had previously excavated. Meanwhile, Frankie describes how her father was shot before his enemies arrived. Donald refuses to trust her when she discloses that Florence did it. Florence confessed to Frankie before she died. According to Frankie, Florence said in a flashback that she was completely in love with Joe, but Joe wanted to stop their relationship. Out of jealousy, thus forced her to murder him. Donald hesitates when he hears this, and he strains to squeeze the trigger when Frankie tells him of the daughter she will be leaving behind. Donald decides to spare her and leave, but she assaults him with a shovel and knocks him down. Donald regains consciousness, loads his shotgun, and pursues Frankie. Frankie enters the van, unties herself, and picks up her gun, loading it. Donald arrives soon after and shoots her. He then receives a phone call from Trevor, who has captured Bartosz. Surprisingly, Trevor shoots Bartosz dead, breaking Donald's heart and putting the film to a close. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.